HTZ back. Thank you, Tom. I'm going to go ahead and read the treasurer's report tonight. I understand because I don't believe Ken is on the radio. I think he's just on Zoom. So for those of you who are on the repeater, I'll go ahead and read the treasurer's report. Before we do that, let's take the minutes of the last meeting and get approved. And the way we've been customarily doing this is that if stand by, I'm admitting somebody. If the person wishes to vote, to offer a correction to the minutes, then we'll ask you to check in with on the radio or on Zoom, whatever. If there's no corrections to be made, then I will go ahead and say that if everybody that's in favor don't say anything, and anybody that's not in favor or that has a correction to speak up. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but let's try it that way. So if everybody's seen the minutes, let's go ahead and take a vote on if there's any corrections to be made. Speak up now. All right, in that case, I'll go ahead and ask that anyone who wishes to vote against minutes do so. If not, your lack of any response here will be a positive response. All right, I guess we can go ahead and assume that the minutes are accepted. For anybody who wishes to come in, who's on the radio and wants to come into the Zoom meeting, if you check our website, the RARC website, there's an instruction on there with a link that'll get you right into the Zoom meeting if you'd like to join us on Zoom. Okay, I'll now go ahead and read the treasurer's report. We are, let's see if I can understand this. We have $12,901.51 in the bank, in the checking account right now. Last month we had, or this past month, we had $126.77 of expenses, which was we had one bad check, we had a bank fee, we had a debit card extra, purchase extra manuals, and that's the manuals we give to the Chesterfield Library, and the radio keeps cutting out. The Chesterfield Library and the Henrico Library, I believe we bought two new extra class license manuals for. And then we also collected dues, $30 and $50 worth of dues. And the balance that came forward from last month was $12,948.28. So total expenses $126.77, and the current balance is $12,901.51. And if there's any correction to that, Ken, let me know. Okay, this is K5HTZ for identification. Let's go ahead and move to the next item of business. I think we have a new member. Let me see what, stand by while I check my paperwork here. We have one new member that came in, and we also have Steve Bowles, who was previously WB4 SED, has now changed his call to W4 SB. So make note of that. Ken, do you have the information on who the new member is? I'm looking for it and I can't find it.
I do. It's a Robert Boomer, KM4BHT, who's a technician.
That's KM4VHT?
KM4BHT, yes.
VHT. Okay. I don't know what's the problem with my radio, but I'm going to try this again. K5HTZ for identification. We have one new member to consider, KM4BHT. He's a technician, wishes to join. Can we take a vote? Anybody who's opposed to it, please speak up. If not, we'll assume that you are in favor of it.
John, also James Maddox, that came in on Friday.
Okay, K4CMK has moved to accept it. And do I have a second from anybody?
Second.
Okay, we have a second on Zoom, so we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, KM4BHT's membership is accepted. All right. All right, we have a couple of announcements that I want to make. I'm hoping that the radio holds out here. First of all, we have somebody who is a real estate agent contacted us. He's selling a house for somebody who's a ham, and there's a 48-foot antenna tower in the yard that they want to give away. So he's asking for somebody to, if they're interested, to come take the tower, to make arrangements to take the tower. He also is offering, the question had come up about liability insurance, about going on the property and removing the tower. And what he's proposing is he has a contractor. If you want the tower, he can make arrangements with the contractor to take it down for you. So if anybody's interested in a 48-foot tower or some pieces thereof, call or an email, and I'll put you in touch with the agent. All right.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to go get the tower themselves and they're just worried about liability, they want to disassemble and everything, I'm a state registered contractor. I'll cover it with the liability for my company.
Okay, I'm looking. Who are you?
K4YXL.
K4YXL. Okay, something that came through on Zoom just now. K5HTZ again. K4YXL is on Zoom, and he said he's a registered tower person. And if somebody's interested in getting the tower, you can talk to him, and he'll help you get it down. All right. Let me check my notes here and see what else I have on the agenda. I think that's it for my reports. Did we have anybody else who has wants to make a report or has some information for us? Okay, Ken, go ahead.
I'd like to let everyone know that the Radio Builders Group will meet this next Tuesday on Zoom. I will be sending out a email for the link for it, and we have some things that we can talk about. We don't have any current new projects because of not having meetings in person. We've kind of lost, some of the momentum that we had with building things. Our last project, was the FT8 machines that we built. We've got a number of them that are working successfully, and we have a number of them that need some modification, need some help. Mine, I cannot get working, and it's a problem because
Those of you on the network right now, I'm on
it was
the repeater right now. Ken Leitner Ken Zudervern is making an announcement.
Need some contacts with it, so I know what
This
that
is K5HTZ.
Rick needs some plates, front and back plates for his. I think I can take mine off and see if I can make a copy of it out of some sheet metal that I have, Rick. And
That'd be good.
if I can put that together. And
Yeah, I figured you could probably do that.
yeah, you have something that you can hold your case, at least hold the
Right.
guts in the case there. There is, I'm waiting for some parts to build some fox hunt receivers. The Richmond, the RATS group approached me a while back and said it'd be kind of neat to have them at FrostFest, either to sell them as a kit or sell them pre-built or something. See what you can come up with, something's cheap, reasonable. And so I'm going to try and do that using a integrated circuit that's basically a one-chip receiver, FM, and try and see if I can put together a really cheap unit. I've got the ICs on order from China. There's a month delay, almost anything coming through, but that's kind of interesting. I've never done any fox hunting, so I need to get together with some people that have experience with that Bill, I think you've done some of that, haven't you? And Bruce has done some of that. But also get together with maybe, the Powhatan group, see how selective and sensitive it is and see if it really works.
What's the term you're using, Ken? Pot stuffing?
Fox and hounds hunt.
Okay.
Fox and hounds hunt.
Got it.
Big in Europe, but they use 80 meters,
Right.
and here, US, I think it's almost all 2 meter kind
Right.
of stuff. So anyway, so there's some ideas. And the other thing too is one of the purpose for us getting together, a lot of times people come up with an idea and say, hey, have we thought about doing something like this? Or here's a new product or something coming out. Bruce has been doing an awful lot of stuff with his Raspberry Pi and connecting and getting into FT8 and working through a lot of problems of audio. And it'd be interesting to hear kind of a longer discussion on some of that. So we have things that we can think about and do and see what we can get together and generate ideas, and gives us something to then work on in our seclusion. Fortunately, Amazon is there, so I at least I can still get parts and stuff like that, so that helps. Of course, my wife keeps complaining about the mail coming in, but hey, what the heck. Anyway, Tuesday, I will send out the notice tomorrow on Saturday. Thank you.
K5HTZ back again on the repeater and on Zoom. I have one other announcement, well, actually a couple other announcements I wanted to make. For those of you who, the Virginia QSO party has come up finally with an awards night that they're going to do on a virtual awards night. So if anybody has not gotten that message through them directly by email, you can give me an email or a call, and I will go ahead and forward this message to you if you're interested. If you have any interest in it, or have an award coming to you. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to mention, we don't know for sure when we're going to be able to get back into our the church where we normally meet, and considering that it's getting close to time, or will be sometime soon, to start thinking about the fall classes, the club is going to go ahead and purchase a Zoom license that will allow the instructors to go ahead and conduct the classes but through Zoom. And we still don't know about the licensing. That's going to be Alan Johnson's thing, but we probably will end up trying to do something to give tests again. So if Alan's around, I'll let him comment on that. But if not, we are definitely working on trying to get something together so that we can have our classes in the fall. The other thing too is we have a lot of equipment that's been donated to us, and a lot of parts, things that came from successions and people downsizing. K5HTZ for identification. We are trying to figure out how to have a flea market. So if anybody has any ideas or anything, a place where we might be able to set up and have a flea market or something, talk to me about it and we'll see if we can work out something, because we really don't know when we're going to be able to get back into church again. And personally, my house is full of stuff that belongs to the club that I'd like to put into flea market and get it out of here so I can use my house again. Okay, K5HTZ, I'm going to go ahead back to the Zoom meeting.
Excuse me. Hi. Do you think that we could at least use the parking lot of the church, as there's like even
W3DH standby. Yeah, Judy, I think that's a Tom question. Something like that might be a possibility.
Yeah, 'cause on the far side there's a ton of room.
Yeah, I mean, if not there, some other parking lot maybe, or something. I don't know. We'll figure out something, but I'd definitely like to have a sale before the end of the year. I have W5DH checking in on the repeater. Go ahead, W5DH. WJ3H. Go ahead, K5HTZ. Okay, thank you very much. K5HTZ is standing by again. Okay, what that message on the repeater was about is that the Rats Club apparently is going to try to go ahead and test on the 27th. They're waiting on the Henrico County to tell them, excuse me, if they can use the pavilion, but they're planning on trying to test on the 27th since field days canceled or modified or whatever it is this year. Go ahead.
Yeah, don't forget to, I put my application in and all that, y'all got my application stuff. And, so I don't know, I just before we actually things,
Okay, Tom, did you get that call?
I didn't get the call. Could you come back again to K4CNK and give me your call, please? KG4AXO, Kilo Golf 4, KG4AXO. So copy, K4CNK.
Okay, and your question was, did they receive your application?
I know y'all got my application and my checks. I talked to somebody, I don't know who, but my name was.
Okay, are you are a new member?
So I'm trying to get back into the club.
Okay, I have a KG4AXO, I think it is.
Yeah, Roger.
Okay, KG4AXO is reapplying to the club, to reinstate his membership. So if we can, I'd like to take a vote and go ahead and vote him back in.
Yay.
Okay, anyone opposed to voting him back in? Okay, all in favor, respond by not responding. Anybody opposed? Then you are accepted back into the club. Congratulations. Welcome back.
John, who was that?
KG4CMK. Wait, no, I'm sorry. KG4AXO. AXO.
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 That's James Maddox, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we've got him.
Okay. Okay, good. We have you on the register, so you're back in the club. All right, K5HTZ, I'm going to stand by on a repeater for a few minutes while I do a show and tell and check and see if there's any other reports coming in on Zoom. If anybody has reports that they need to give us by way of the repeater, please stand by and I'll call for those in a second. All right, anybody on Zoom got reports or anything else that you want to give us? Okay, nothing heard. Anyone on the repeater have a report that they need to give us? K5HTZ in the net. This is K5HTZ. Bruce indicated everything is back up with the club station. Thank you, Bruce. W4BRU says K5HTZ back. All right. Is there anyone else that has reports for us tonight? Okay, I'm going to stand by on a repeat and then I'm going to do a show and tell on Zoom. All right, guys. I picked this up a couple of weeks ago. This is the first portable radio that was made. Of the first run of portable radios, I should say. It's an RCA made in 1925. It uses 6 UX199 tubes, 45 volt B battery, 4.5 volt A battery, and C battery, and a 1.5 volt A battery. It has a built-in Horn speaker, which I'll try to show you in a minute if I can share the desktop and show you a picture of it, because I can't disassemble a radio right now to show you. But this predated the fatter portable, which was supposedly one of the first portables. It's an interesting radio. One of the interesting things about it too is that the antenna is built into the door. As you can see, the door closes, but the antenna swings independent of the door so that you can direct it to the station. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my desktop so that I can show you the what the speaker looks like in it. That's what the Horn speaker looks like. It's in the bottom section of the case.
Wow.
Interesting little radio. Okay, so is there anybody else has anything for us tonight other than the presentation? Go ahead, Ken, with the RARC meeting. We're going to go ahead and close the business portion of the meeting if there's no other comments or anything that any business.
I have a question.
Stand by. Yes, Judy.
How long did it take for it to go from your radio to the one that they carried in the military?
The first military one was in 1917, but it was not. It was a crystal set, from what I understand. It wasn't a tube radio. This is when I said portable, it's the first tube, one of the first tube portables. And they did have CW stuff working through telephone lines in World War One. Good comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no other comments, then I'll go ahead and turn it back over to KN4CMK to close the net down, and we're going to go to the presentation. If you'd like to join us for the presentation, which tonight is Dr. Rick Wallace going to give us a talk on pacemakers and the effect of radio frequency radiation with the human body. If you'd like to join us on Zoom for that presentation, and you don't have the link, our link is on the RARC website. Tom, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you. This is K5HTZ Clear.
KA408 Jim. And John asked me to speak about ham radio and pacemakers, and I think that's a good topic because hams are older people and the incidence of heart disease goes up in older people. So if I were doing this live, I would ask for a show of hands of how many people have some type of implantable cardiac device, but I'm assuming it's quite a few people. So the comments that I'm going to make are general informational comments. They're not meant to represent any kind of specific medical information. So if anyone has a question about their particular situation or their particular device, they should speak to their cardiologist. If the manufacturers have engineers that are available, and you can go to the website of your device manufacturer, and they can give you a link to an engineer, and they can answer specific questions about your device. A lot of those engineers are hams themselves, and so they're very informative in that regard. Also, if you're really not sure about what the RF environment is in your shack, sometimes an experienced ham can come by and investigate that for you. So what I'm going to start by doing is showing just some basic slides about cardiac anatomy, physiology, why people need pacemakers, about the types of pacemakers, and also I'll talk about implantable defibrillators, and then we'll talk about the ham radio. So let me see if I can get these slides up here. Okay.
Now we're seeing it. Now we're seeing it.
Yeah, could you go back and say what you said?
You mean everything?
No, just the early part.
All right. I talked about, they're asking me to admit Daniel, so I'm admitting Daniel. I talked about the normal anatomy of the heart. And so is everyone seeing that?
Yeah.
This picture. So human beings have 4 chamber hearts. There is the 2 atria, right atrium, left atrium. Those are low pressure receiving chambers of the heart. And then they have the ventricles, which are high pressure pumping chambers of the heart. And you can see here that the muscles in the ventricles are big because they're hard pumping. So when the body uses all the oxygen from the blood, it returns to the right atrium. The right atrium contracts through the tricuspid valve, puts the blood into the right ventricle. When the right ventricle contracts, it closes the tricuspid valve, and the pulmonary valve is not shown here, but the pulmonary valve shoots the blood out into the pulmonary artery, which goes to each lung, and then the lung oxygenates the blood. Then it comes back from the heart through from the lungs through the pulmonary veins into the right atrium, goes through the mitral valve, and then when the ventricle fills, now the important thing is the ventricle needs to have time to fill before it contracts. That's why the atrium has to contract first, then the ventricle. And so when the ventricle contracts, the mitral valve is closed and blood is ejected through the aortic valve into the aorta. So what happens as a result of organic heart disease is some people get what's called conducting system disease. And so this is the conducting system of the heart. This is what's called the sinoatrial node. The conduction system of the heart consists of modified muscles. So the sinoatrial node is the biological pacemaker of the heart. The sinoatrial node receives impulses from other parts of the body. So let's say, for example, if you exercise, it increases your heart rate. If you're resting, it's slower. So then from the sinoatrial node, it goes to the atrioventricular node. And what this does is provide a little delay in conduction to allow the atria to contract first, and then a while after the ventricles. And then from there are the bundle branches. And there is the right bundle branch, which goes to the right ventricle. There's the left bundle branch, which goes to the left ventricle, and this has an anterior and posterior branch. So conduction system disease can consist of failure of the heart's biologic pacemaker or trouble in the conducting system. And if you don't have a normal signal for your heart to beat, the ventricles down here won't pump blood normally, and you will faint or other bad things will happen or die. The other thing that happens is the ventricles themselves, usually the conduction system, usually in the setting of coronary heart disease, can become damaged, and the ventricles will take off under their own rhythm, which is called ventricular tachycardia, or a more chaotic rhythm may ensue, which is called ventricular fibrillation, where the different muscles in the heart are contracting like a bag of worms. And that's what causes sudden death. So you don't want that to happen. You'll see if I can get the next. So these are the indications for permanent pacemaker. And the first one is acquired atrioventricular. We talked about acquired atrioventricular block or conduction system disease. Second degree, there's what's called first degree heart block. I won't get into all that, but second degree heart block is where you have some beats that get through and others don't. Third degree heart block is where there's no conduction of beats from the atrium to the ventricle. And then sometimes, whoops, after a heart attack, you might need one. And then trifascicular block means bundle branch disease. And then sinus node dysfunction, different reasons why the heart is not transmitting its beat. So that's the reason for a pacemaker. Now, let's see if I can make the next one come up. And these are the indications for an implantable defibrillator. So if people have, these are the indications for people who have not had an event. So if you have heart disease and your heart is not emptying, has a low ejection fraction, if you have a history of a heart attack, normally what the ejection fraction is there's a certain volume of blood in the ventricle and diastole, And then when the heart contracts, it ejects a fraction of that blood. So normally you should eject at least 50% of that blood. If somebody has a bad heart, then they inject less than that. So if you have an ejection fraction of 30%, then 70% of the blood is still remaining in your left ventricle after it contracts, and that causes problems like fainting and low blood pressure. If somebody faints for no reason, if their electrophysiologist can induce dangerous rhythms by electrophysiology study, and then there are certain hereditary conditions called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and long QT syndrome. Now, if someone has ever had an episode of ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation, which are life-threatening rhythms, that would also be another reason to have an implanted defibrillator. Now, there are different kinds of pacemakers. There are one-chamber pacemakers, there are two-chamber pacemakers. If you just have sinus disease with normal conduction system, you maybe can just use an atrial pacemaker. If you have sinus disease and conduction system, you might have a two-chamber pacemaker. It just depends on what the particular form of heart disease you have is. Now, this is a picture of the normal heartbeat, and this is called the P wave. This little thing here is called the Q wave, RS. This is called the ST segment. Some of you with coronary artery disease may have heard discussion of ST segment elevation, and this is called the T wave. What the P wave is a contraction of the atrium, followed by a period of time. The QRS wave is the contraction of the ventricle. Then there's a latency period, and then the ventricle depolarizes. So this is the normal P wave that's conducted normally through the system. All right, now this is a paced heart rhythm. And so in this case, now this person actually has P waves, but this spike here is the pacer spike. So this person, they used to have what are called asynchronous pacemakers, which meant that the pacemaker sent out a beat whether your heart needed it or not. Most heart pacemakers now are what are called synchronous pacemakers, meaning that they are set to deliver a beat to your heart if your heart rate drops below a certain 70, 72 beats a minute, depending on how it was set by your cardiologist. So that's what a paced rhythm looks like. Get to my other slides here without inking the whole thing out. All right. Let's see if I can bring up the next group of slides I want to show you. Now, a lot of the next slides I'm going to show you, if you search ham radio pacemaker, the ARRL has a site, and on that site there are links to several major pacemaker manufacturers: St. Jude's, Medtronic, Boston Medical. So all of these slides I'm going to show you are from those sources, so you can link up there. Okay, anyone seeing that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we see it.
So it says problems with electromagnetic interference are rare. Manufacturers try to do a good job to protect people. Now, the normal frequencies in the heart, and I kind of question this lower figure, they say 10 hertz to 100 hertz. But I would say if your pulse is 60 beats a minute, that seems to me that would be 1 hertz. So anyway, the electrical frequencies in the heart are below 100 hertz. So the pacemakers have a bandpass filter, so that frequencies above this range don't get into the pacemaker. But in every other case of filtering, sometimes the filter can be overwhelmed if the interference signal is too powerful. So there's a couple of ways that there's electromagnetic interference. Galvanic interference means a direct contact with electrical current, and typically that would happen if you're getting cardioverted or some other electrical stimulators. Magnetic interference occurs when you're in close proximity to a strong magnetic field, and this is typically would be with an MRI machine, which is why people with certain pacemakers cannot go in an MRI machine. And then what I'm going to emphasized is electromagnetic interference. And this is coming from a different device, many different devices, but particularly radio transmitters. And the thing that's interesting about radio waves is a sustained carrier doesn't bother the heart very much. It's a pulse carrier, like microphone click keying or modulated RF has a much more significant effect on the heart than unmodulated carrier. So this is just another, this was from St. Jude, and what the effects that you can have on your device is the radio pulse can make your pacemaker think that your heart has delivered a beat, so it won't deliver one. It may deliver an extra beat. It may cause your heart rate to go too slow, too fast. In the case of the defibrillator, it may deliver a shock when you don't need one, or may not deliver one when you need one. And usually those effects occur while during the duration of the radio wave. And then I'm going to go show you another slide from Medtronic. This is a slide from Medtronic, and basically they reiterate the same thing, that implanted devices have a highly selective filter, and it shows the ways that it can cause a falsely deliver a shock or inappropriate sensing, and so it can cause things you don't want to happen. So then they have a breakdown here, and it's related to the power of the device in question. But other things that also need to be taken into consideration would be if you have a gain antenna, if that's aimed at you, what the polarity of the wave is. It may have to do with the specific way the electrodes are set up in your pacemaker. So these are guidelines, but you can see these guidelines are based on power. And basically the figure they're concerned about is a field of 100 volts a meter, or 100 volts per meter. So the higher the power, the further away from your device you want it to be. Now, John mentioned that, can everybody still hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
John mentioned he's going to get a kilowatt amplifier. So if John has a kilowatt amplifier, he needs to be at least 30 feet away from his antenna, and maybe more if he has a directional antenna. And the other thing is, if you got a kilowatt amplifier and you take the cover off, then that might expose you to a more powerful field. So basically, it's a question of distance. But again, with regard to your specific device, you want to consult your manufacturer about your specific device. Now, there's a whole, Boston Scientific has a whole big list of everything you can possibly imagine. And I'll just show you some of them. But every possible electrical device they have, it goes on for pages and pages. And they give you the precautions there. This goes on for pages and pages, but this is available. You can get that information from the manufacturer's website.
I have a question.
Hold on 1 second. All right, so that's that again. There's another one I wanted to show you. I'm going to take your question in a minute, but there's another one I wanted to show you. There's another way to look at this. I'm trying to find that slide. Which one is that? Over here. Okay, so this just reiterates the distance issue, but there's other ways to look at it. They talk about, this isn't radio necessarily, but they talk about electric fields, 6,000 volts a meter, That's at low frequency. At high frequency, there's your figure of 100 volts a meter, but then they also talk about modulated magnetic fields, and they specify that in Gauss or amps per meter or static magnetic fields. So that gets into thing that is really beyond the realm of radio. But suffice it to say, you don't want to hold your HT up against your pacemaker and key it. And you should, be aware of what your particular setting is in your station. And if you have a specific question about your device, you need to speak to your cardiologist or consult a manufacturer's representative. Now, who had the question?
This is Ken.
Okay, Ken.
My question is, you're considered more about the power because you're worried about overloading the pacemaker.
Yes, it's related to its power and distance.
Okay, as opposed to the frequency that you're at.
Right. Because then you can, I don't know there's an upper limit on frequency, but it's enough RF of any frequency. It's the transient that seems to be the issue. When you key a microphone, when you key a Morse code key, when you modulate the RF, it's the transient that shows up like that pacer spike. And it fools the equipment into detecting something that's not there or not responding to something that is there. But the reason it's distance and power because of the inverse square law of how RF degenerates over distance.
Another question?
No more questions, huh?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Right, fire.
Gosh, I forgot what it was now. I should have wrote it down.
I also specialize in memory problems.
Rick, on the bundle branch block, I have a left bundle branch block.
Right.
I have PVCs and PACs
Right.
and dropped heartbeats. What
Right.
is if without having to have a pacemaker, do I have any issues? As far as
Well,
RF
I think
is concerned?
there's two left bundles. There's an anterior. Some people have what's called an anterior hemi block or a posterior hemi block. And again, I'm not a cardiologist, but I think if you just have an anterior, like a single fascicular block, it's not a big deal because you're still getting some conduction from the other posterior anterior branch. If you have a bifascicular, meaning the right and left are blocked or all three are blocked, that's when you have an issue. The PACs and PVCs in and of themselves are not dangerous, but there are people that have what are called supraventricular tachycardia, which is where the atrium beats too fast. And then there's PVCs occurring in isolation are common and not that unusual. It's when they serialize, after, again, I'm not a cardiologist, but after 8 or 10 beats of ventricular beats, then you worry about ventricular fibrillation, which is where the ventricles are beating so fast it cannot pump blood normal.
Right.
The heart cannot go too fast or it loses effectiveness in pumping blood.
Okay.
I remember what my question was.
All right, go ahead.
Does the pacemaker have a recovery rate and or could there be permanent problem?
Usually it recovers as soon as the stimulus is gone, the pacemaker recovers. Now, I suppose in a really bad situation, you could fry the innards of your pacemaker. I've never heard of that happening, but that I guess it's a theoretical possibility in a really high field.
Okay. Ken, did you have a question?
I have a question, Rick. I had atrial fibrillation
Right.
back and in the hospital, and they did a cardioversion on me. And I understand that involved them putting a defibrillator on me and stopping my heart. And then, for some period or whatever, and then the defibrillator again and starting it up. It's sort of like resetting that node or whatnot.
Yes. In other words, the heart has intrinsic rhythmicity. And when you have a tachycardia, and even in the setting of if you have the implantable defibrillator, the first thing it does is give a series of pulses to try to resynchronize the heart.
Okay.
If that does not revert you to a regular heartbeat, then it will shock your heart.
No, I don't have a defibrillator. I mean, I don't have
Well, what basically a shock does is kind of erase the slate on your heart and knock out the aberrant rhythms and then let the natural rhythmicity try to start up again.
technically, was I dead?
How good is your cardiologist?
He's still sending me bills.
No, I would not say you were not technically dead.
Oh,
I mean, no. You know, there are different things they do with atrial fibrillation. Another thing they do is ablation, which is where they go in and destroy tissue around in the left atrium where the pulmonary veins come in, and that tissue is felt to be arrhythmogenic, and that's a different story altogether. But
that was the next plan. That was plan B.
yeah, because atrial fibrillation is not a good thing, and it's not a good thing, particularly in the left ventricle, because it allows blood to stagnate in that ventricle and forms clots, which then get shot out into the rest of the body, including the brain, causing a stroke. So that's why not uncommonly people are anticoagulated with warfarin or some of the newer ones to reduce, and that significantly reduces your risk of having a stroke.
Yeah, so that's why I'm on blood thinners again. Huh?
Right, exactly. That substantially reduces your risk of having a stroke.
Interesting. Well, I think this has been a very interesting presentation for considering that most of us have enough RF around to cause problems.
You know, I think the take-home message is these devices are pretty safe, but better to be safe than sorry in terms of what you do.
Yeah.
Rick,
Yep.
it's Bruce. I have a friend of mine. We work over at the Science Museum, and we use Van de Graaff generators, and you know, Tesla coil kind of things.
Yeah.
He got a pacemaker put in, and they said it wasn't safe for him to use that anymore.
Well,
parking and everything.
You have to ask what's happening there, and I guess you'd have to ask what the electric field is around that generator. You could probably measure it.
It basically is man-made lightning, but low amperage lightning, but fairly high voltage.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't speculate, but I think you could have some. I think Fluke makes an electric field measuring device, so I think you just need to measure the electric field. Now, if you go back to that slide I showed you from Boston, I don't know whether Boston Scientific mentioned Tesla coils, but it mentioned just about everything else.
Okay, that's a good idea.
But I think it just depends on the energy involved.
He particularly.
I mean, I guess you could ask yourself the question that a lightning bolt that's a million volts hits in your backyard, and that's probably a much higher electric field, and that doesn't shut your pacemaker off. So,
well, he particularly liked giving that particular demonstration, and so we.
Yeah, no, but if you think about natural lightning and the field strength from that, or then I think it's hard. You know, a Tesla or Van de Graaff, particularly a Van de Graaff, doesn't compare.
Right. Well, I think that was.
If you had a question about that, I'd call your pacemaker company and ask them to talk to the engineer, and they can give you specific information on that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I'll suggest to him. That's good. Thanks.
Sure. Everybody's heart still beating? Any other questions?
I think you've given us a good idea.
All right.
Well, thank you, Rick.
Like I said, you can link to these slides, or you can link just if you just search ham radio pacemaker. The Air has a site with links to with most of these things I've just shown you.
Well, we really appreciate you putting this together.
My pleasure.
That was awesome. Thank you so much.
See, Judy, you're too young to worry about it.
Hey, this year's a big 6-0. I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, you know, organic heart disease, coronary heart disease, that's the cause of most of it. So.
Well, mine was caused by a direct lightning strike.
Seriously.
And when I was 16 years old, my heart's never been right since.
Well, you know, that's how lightning kills people, by the way. Causes a cardiac arrest. And that's why when I used to be a Boy Scout leader and we were hiking up on the mountains, I told people to stay about 20 feet apart. Because if some people get hit and you go over there and start CPR, you can bring them back right away, pretty quickly.
Yeah, I had training in CPR for, I was a lifeguard for years. So
They used to talk about what's called a precordial thump where you pound on the chest. And now I think that the conclusion is that doesn't generate much electricity, but I think pumping on the chest, may get the heart started again in that setting.
I noticed too that most places you go now have defibrillators
Right.
if it's any kind of a public space.
Well, the whole, if you look at the mortality of cardiac arrest, that's death, and that doesn't include morbidity, meaning resistant logic complaints. It's 24% and out of hospital cardiac arrest, and half of that in the hospital.
Yeah.
So when your heart stops, after about 5 minutes, you're starting to sustain irreversible brain damage. So that's why, hopefully having a defibrillator, and that's why you've seen on a sporting event or something like that where somebody gets timely defibrillation, saves their life.
Will the defibrillator let you know if that person doesn't need to be defibrillated? I mean, like
If they know,
thrombosis
what
or
you're doing.
something.
In other words, when you put the paddles on, it gives you rhythm.
Okay.
Now, if someone's there without a pulse, I think an unconscious, you can probably assume that that's what's going on, but you will get a rhythm strip. I think someone who used one of those should be trained to do it, but
Yeah.
you will get a rhythm strip that would show they're either no rhythm or a rhythm like ventricular fibrillation.
So it's not like a case if the person's got a coronary thrombosis and you try to defibrillate them, you'd blow their heart up or something.
No, you wouldn't blow their heart up, but that's not, I mean, someone, if you pass out from a heart attack, it means that you've suffered so much damage to your heart muscle that it's not pumping enough blood. That may be outside the context of an arrhythmia.
Okay.
But you won't cause the heart to explode under any circumstance.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Then I guess we can go ahead and thank you and close our meeting for tonight.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.